Thanks for tuning in to tonight's edition of the RENSHAW Report. Murray the Eye, reporting from the city too tough to die in New London. My special guest tonight, the most powerful man in the city of New London these days, Chairman of the Democratic Party, William Sadai. Bill Sadai is here with us. And I also asked Ian Thomas from Scope magazine to sit on this segment as well, because I've seen some of his interviews. They're second to none. He's better than Dan Rather. He's asked some very difficult questions and didn't hesitate, and did them in a very professional manner on the interviews that I saw from the Scope magazine. Ian Thomas, and thank you for joining us, Ian.
Thank you, Murray. Thanks.
Now, before we get going, we want to wish Jim Dugan, one of the greatest guys in the city of New London, a special get well and a speedy recovery. Jimmy, you got to get going. We need you back. I need you down fireworks night. And tell your wife to get that stove fixed, because we haven't had any chocolate chip cookies in quite some time. But Jim, all kidding aside, from all your friends, and especially from Jack Barkley, get well soon. We're pulling for you, and we need you back out in the field as soon as possible. The other issue I wanted to talk about, the gentleman who calls in weekly on the cameras in Waterford. Now, there are cameras there, but the police department is not using them. I was at Benny's, and I saw the camera across the street, and this caller insists that the camera watches the cars take an illegal right turn, you know, right on red, where it says no right on red. Police department claims that is not the case. If you take her, if you take her right on red and the cop is there, he's gonna pinch you for sure, and that's a dangerous spot. Benny's and the stoplight down below. But the fact of the matter is, the cameras are not being used by the police to give out tickets. And if you have any questions, I'm sure if you're watching, you're going to be calling in. So, Bill, Chairman of the Democratic Party, as I mentioned before, what's your take on how things are going? Is it as bad as I think it is, or the population thinks it is? And how are you feeling about things in New London these days?
Well, as far as New London, lifelong resident of New London, love the city. As you say, too tough to die, and I enjoy my time here. As far as the politics, it's like any town, any municipality. You're in the midst of the budget discussions, the debate. It's very lively right now in the city of New London, and it's lively between Democrats. And of course, the lone Republican on the council, Councilor Spicacci. So I think, you know, the dialogue is good. I think the debate is good. I think a lot of people have learned a lot more about the budgetary process that's going on here in the city, so I think it's been educational as well.
But the problem is, we don't believe anybody, because the city council meeting is filled with different answers to the same questions over and over again. As far as the budgetary process goes, I think it's flawed, and we don't trust anybody. Well, you got a police department who is going to lay off 20 people. In the 11th hour, the police chief texts into the meeting that she found the money miraculously. I mean, there's no credibility to anything that's going on. You got a finance director, and he's a very nice guy. He comes up with different figures at every meeting. Nobody's believing anyone. And please,
I agree with you. I agree with you, Murray. One of the most frustrating parts from a citizen's perspective is that there's this constant shifting base of numbers. You know, no one really has. We can't just see one solid number, one solid ledger that, like, this is what's in, this is what's out. You know, this is the problem. And I think that's one of the largest parts of the problem, is that everyone has a different perspective on what the actual problem is. And, you know, until we agree, it's like any debate or any philosophical discussion. The first thing you have to do is establish the definitions of the terms you're going to use. You know, and you know, so if you're going to say, you know, conservative versus liberal, you need to establish what a conservative is and what a liberal is, or you know, what shade of blue or what shade of red, you know, we're going to debate. You know, you have to establish the definitions, and right now we don't have any established definitions. We can't see the hard numbers.
And that's the thing that I think is frustrating to all, as far as, and again, when I was on the council, I chaired, for my 8 years, I chaired finance. So very familiar with the budget, and still to this day, because it's online, I look at the budget. But the thing that's a little frustrating, they're going to find out, is by state statute, by June 1, they have to have the third and final reading of the budget and put it in place. And a lot of times, and again, not just this year, but other years, you don't even know what the state is allocating, because they were still in discussions, hadn't finalized their budget, so they didn't know what they were getting for ECS educational cost sharing or town aid or different things of that nature. But as far as the moving sum right now, you just mentioned the new finance director. He inherited a mess from the previous finance director, previous administration, and I don't think you unearth everything in a matter of 2 to 3 months. I know we as citizens, and I'm saying myself included, is frustrated at times trying to, you pick up the paper and read the stuff, but I think one thing that's happened is you get to watch it on public access, and you get to see some of the debate is taking place, and a lot of the stuff in the figures. And I'm not going to say they're exact to the dime, because I had these same battles, and I'll go back 20 years ago with our superintendent, when he'd sit there and say we had a certain surplus, didn't, and all of a sudden you had what was almost there, 300,000, where they'd nitpick, was it 226 or 418? So I think the figures are moving. I think Murray, what has happened, especially in this one, and I applaud the council as a whole and the administration, is it's a lively debate. I mean, they're agreeing to disagree. They're not agreeing. But there's a debate that's going on, which I think is important, because a lot of times, and you sit there and think about it with us, in the city of New London, or you from East Lyme, or whatever town someone may live in, all of a sudden they're given here's your budget, here's what your tax or mill rate's going to be, here's your taxes. Either here they are, and a lot of times it's too late to even go out to referendum or petition or through your RTM, depending on which respective form of government you have.
So what's different from this budget than the budgets that you served to in your day as mayor, at least twice in the city? What's so different now that didn't surface at the point in time you were in charge?
Well, I don't want to say I was in charge. I mean, we had a full-time city manager. We had the director, Don Gray, was the finance director for all my years on the council. I talked to him, I don't want to say daily, but weekly, dealing with the budgets. So we kind of had that. So I don't know, and again, I don't govern that way. I mean, I don't get involved that way. If they're discussing it, what's the fund balance, what's the pension, what's the different things, because a lot of times, and people don't want to realize this is an inherited budget. This is not something that they came up with. So when Mayor Finizio came out, and I'll say, let me preface my remarks, I wasn't in agreement of a 20% tax increase. But that was a true budget when he talked about that, to get the exact spending that we're at now, because people took from the fund balance, borrowed from the pension funds, sat down, and you realize we made an $11 million investment in downtown New London 3 years ago. Guess what? Those bonds are coming due now. You have to start paying those bills. City Pier. I understand it, again, just from people around the city, a disaster. Who was overseeing that? And that's what I'm going back to the former administration. So I think when you look at it, when we went to a strong mayor form of government compared to a city manager, I think in the last 4 to 5 years it's been a disaster what's been going on in the city. And it's just, unfortunately, this council and this administration has inherited that.
I'd agree with that.
This mayor is not making it any better, Bill. His public relations, I mean, you're in public relations yourself. His mythology in negotiating contracts is nothing more than political blackmail. He made a deal with the council. The council agreed to a 8% increase when they originally started out at 2%. After the agreement was made, your mayor came out with the layoff notices without advising the city council, who he needs to work with to move forward. I mean, everything is bizarre from day one. I want to...
Let me just, can I make one comment there? Yeah. In defense of the mayor and the administration, and I know you say he came out with the layoff notices. If you followed the city of New London, or anyone, the mayor, first selectman, or then with us, the city manager, he would announce and pass out pink slips. So we as council did react. Did he share with us that he's going to be laying off 10 or 4 or 6 or whatever? I know when we set the budget, he would come back and he'd present to us, here's what would happen because of the consequences. And that's what I think has happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks, too. Again, I don't know if there was a deal that if we got to 8.3%, there wouldn't be any layoffs. I don't know if that...
Well, obviously, they're at odds. Obviously, he's a drama queen, because he loves drama. And obviously, the system that you helped enact, by the way.
I did.
Because you were very active on the Charter Revision Committee. Many of the items there you had to approve before they went out to vote as in your position as a Democratic town chairman.
Well, no,
when you were pulling the strings.
Let me step
and
back.
How do you feel about, I mean, obviously it's not working, Bill. In addition to that, there's a new group that's formed called Help Save New London or something like that is adamant that this guy's got to go, and he's got to go quick, because that's what's behind it. How do you feel about that?
I don't want to step on your
You're
toes.
more than welcome, sir.
But I just, I think it's a little early to pass judgment on the strong mayor system. I mean, there's how many years this city operated with a city council and city manager? It was 90 years,
92
roughly?
years.
Yeah.
Wasn't that bad. I think I'm back now.
I think that system is endemic. With that comes sort of what I've come to call cafeteria table politics. If you just have a city council, all they have to do is garner somewhere in the top, like, 7 votes. They have to finish, just enough to get on the council. You don't have to carry the popular vote of the city. So it's very hard, and with the city manager being hired by the council, it was very hard to track who was responsible for what. To hold people accountable for things like the city pier. City pier is a debacle. For all the talk about how much this current mayor has wasted, so to speak, I should do the air quotes on that, in money. And I'm not taking sides on this. I'm just saying this is like what I've noticed in watching the conversations. For my estimates, and we're talking with people, it's anywhere between $100,000 to $500,000 that the city pier is overrunning in cost because of a bad design, a flawed design that somebody approved. The builders were building it, as according to the specs on the blueprints, but there was some group of people that signed off on those blueprints, and the blueprints were a bad design. Like they're having to retrofit the docks now to accommodate to make up for missing space.
Let me just go back to something.
That's a bit of a tangent.
No,
but
and I want to come back to that. And I just want to first address something you'd mentioned as far as chair of the Charter Commission. I was chair of the Charter Commission, but not the charter that passed this one. I was still strongly in favor of the strong mayor form of government. When I was the chair, unfortunately, it did not pass. The voters voted it down when I chaired it, but the following commission that did pass it, did push through the strong mayor form of government. And I don't want to say they did. They made the recommendation, went to the council put the wording in place, and we, the citizens of New London, approved that. But going right back to what you were saying right there, when he mentioned 92 years, and you said the city manager form of government worked, the person who has oversight on the city pier is our former city manager, Marty Berliner. And they were bringing him back up until a few weeks ago and paying him a consultant fee to do a job that was never done correctly in the first place.
$15,000.
Right, so when you drive down City Pier, it looks like a runway. There's no way if you're riding a bike that's going to stop where they used to have pilings and things in place. It's just a flat cement slab.
Yeah.
Ian, how long have you been paying attention to New London?
Well, I've only been living here full-time for the past 4 years. I moved back in 2008, but I'm from Montville originally, and I've been in and out of New London on and off for my whole life.
All right, so the deal with the city pier, it's consistent of the way New London does business.
Yeah.
On every job.
Yeah, the whole waterfront park actually is a bit of a travesty. There's so much wasted waterfront space that's inaccessible to medium and small size vessels, which is your bread and butter if you want to attract vessels coming into the city.
The point that I was trying to make was the success or failure to any construction job is a plan of specifications and plans and terms and conditions that the contractor must adhere to. This has been going on for years.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example.
Wait, before we get off that point, though, that actually might argue against the city manager position. like the city council, city manager
Well,
arrangement.
it
Because
argues against somebody not doing their job.
well, it's hard to get oversight. It's hard to hold somebody.
That we pay. Now, the high school, or the magnet school,
Mm-hmm.
there is between $2 and $8 million of money that's supposed to be reimbursed to the city of New London by the state that the taxpayers have paid out.
Yeah.
That money is being kept on the state level because certain things weren't completed.
Mm-hmm.
Certain items on the job and certain pieces of paper that weren't filed. The taxpayers have funded this debacle and do over and over again. So the point is 100% on target. We make the same mistakes over and over and over again. We reward people. I mean, whoever's in charge of this stuff, they should have been fired a long time ago, not rewarded.
Yeah.
And anybody that doesn't see this, we put these political hacks on these building committees who know absolutely nothing. When you have talent in this city, good people who are willing to get involved, and they don't utilize that talent for the wrong reason. And it's a shame, and it's all coming to roost now. Because that $2 to $4 to $6 million that's owed us, that would make this tax thing look pretty good now, and maybe we wouldn't have to go for a tax increase.
To me, Murray, I mean, that's almost a decade old, the Magnet High School. That's a quick fix, but that's a very valid and good point regarding that. But the unfortunate thing in the last 3 to 5 years, and you know who was at the helm, they brought in an acting city manager when Richard Brown left. $11 million thing that for a year and a half you couldn't even use an elevator. I spoke to that same former city manager regarding ADA compliance with my son at the high school because it was non-accessible. And here we are 5 years since I've been bringing that up and nothing, because he knew he was here short term. And it didn't happen where, I think, God rest his soul, Francis Driscoll, when I served with him, and Richard Brown, they had a vested interest. We agreed to disagree on many of things, but they had the city at heart. I think with this interim, when we're in flux, going to strong mayor versus non-strong mayor, I think this is what we're paying in this day and age. But I'll go back, it also happened with Ocean Beach bathhouse.
Oh, we paid for that twice.
Right. Again,
It's historically, it's the way we do business. Let's get back to the charter just for a second. Would you agree, as the chairman of the Democratic Party, that the charter needs to be revisited and needs a little bit of tweaking? And many people, and Ian, I would admit, I don't like anything that the mayor has done from day one, but I want him to succeed. Whoever the mayor is, I want him to succeed. But does the charter need to be tweaked a little bit, and do you think that is appropriate at this point in time?
when you say tweaked, be specific. Are you talking about a removal process, a recall notice?
No, I think I don't think that can go in there. I'm saying maybe that 6-to-1 requirement maybe need to be revisited.
For an override? The override requirements?
Yeah.
You think it's a little too steep?
Yes.
Yeah, I do, yeah. Personally, especially when most
A
of
5 to 2 would be more palatable?
for me it would.
Yeah.
Most of the commission members admit that they favored the 5-to-2, but see what was happening during this election. Certain people thought that they were going to get elected, so they allowed this immense amount of power to be restored to the mayor's position, and people have made those. They talked around it a little bit, but is that not true, Bill? And that's why this guy has got so much power.
I wouldn't say that. I think with the power, and I will say this in no disrespect, because I think they did a great job, like I thought we did a decent job with the charter revision, it was also they were backed up against the timeline because they wanted to happen with this municipal election. Because if not, it was another 2 years off that you would have had the city manager, form of government. And I'll say it, we would have been limping, if not crawling along at that point. So I think, in defense of them, there was a rush of urgency to get the thing through. I still believe the strong mayor, form of government will work for the city of New London. In the long run, I think it's in its infancy stages. But again, I'm going to keep coming back. I mean, they inherited, this city council, this city administration inherited 2 years of of things that needed to be fixed.
Would you guys mind if we took a couple of calls?
Please.
Sure.
Thanks for holding. Thanks for calling. You're live with the chairman of the Democratic Party, Bill Sadie, and Ian Thomas from the Scope magazine.
Hi, good evening, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Hey, I have a question for Mr. Sadai. I thought that for any school that receives federal and state money that they must be ADA compliant, or they can hold that funding until they become compliant. I've heard you visit this about your son, and I can't believe it's 5 or 6 years later, and they still haven't, reached that goal. And my second question is as far as the magnet school. Now, wasn't there a requirement that the towns had to send so many kids into New London to attend the school in order for them to qualify for the funding? And I'm just curious if they have, achieved that goal as well as with the other magnet schools. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you. The first thing is with the ADA is yes, and again, behind the scenes, and my son, first and foremost, let me just state this, does not go to school in New London any longer. He's moved to Florida with his mother, and I knew that was happening when I went public with it, because I didn't want to look at like I was self-serving. But behind the scenes, I spoke to the 2 superintendents ago, the present city manager, because of the way it's governed between city council / board of ed. And to answer your question, yes, $8.5 million is still in jeopardy that they could be losing federal funding because they keep passing the buck back and forth. And I get all the building committee reports, I read that, but they haven't reached a resolve. Do we build a new high school, build as new, all this stuff, and that's going to lead us into some board of ed conversations. As far as the way I understand it, the magnet school, you are right on the formula. The exact formula I don't know, but they are pretty full, or are full, and they do meet the requirements from the surrounding communities as far as students attending.
Thanks for calling you live.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Listen, I just moved to New London about 7 years ago, and I'm a loyal Democrat. I've been sticking to that, even when we have some candidates who are a little bit, shaky. But did anyone actually look at the credentials of this guy before he came in office?
Are we referring to the mayor?
Because he was a Republican first, and he changed his affiliation, and his agenda is somewhat along the line of what you see Republicans doing to people all across this country. And I know he inherited a mess. I mean, look at the 8 years of the previous president is where all of this really started. No one wants to really tell the truth about that, and they're trying to forget that. But this guy is doing things right now, and in my opinion, this is only the start. When the economy's bad, you try to make cuts, you try to make differences in people's lives without cutting people's jobs, because that's the worst kind of way you can start your agenda. And 3-4 years from now, he's going to get up there again and say, okay, folks, I want you to vote for me and keep me in office. And I'm going to say, why? What did you do positive for this city except get everybody upset with you for the way you handle this thing? So, I mean, I want people to look at this guy's agenda. It really goes along what I've been saying about what the Republican Party does. They don't care about people except for that 1%, because for him to have a chance to keep people at work and then still go on this thing about, I want to let people go, I got a problem with that. And, I mean, we just seen Wisconsin try to do a recall on their governor. Can we do a recall on this guy?
Well, I'm going to answer part of the question, please, if anyone wants to add in, because it's really for all of us. First of all, welcome to New London. I know you've been here 7 years. It's a great city, as I said a few minutes ago. But I got to tell you, every candidate, including the present mayor, was vetted through the paper, the media, the Scope magazine, the online publication. So you kind of knew everything from what turn, if they took the right turn, as Murray talked about up there at Benny's. So everyone knew that he was a Republican, had switched, had moved. But in the end, the citizenry of New London overwhelmingly, almost by a 2-to-1 margin, elected this person as the first mayor, strong mayor of the city of New London. So it was, the final say was with the people of New London. As far as the agenda and dealing with it, the only report card you have is, and again for the mayor, would be in 4 years if he opts to run for re-election. So, again, he inherited it, and the city is, trying to work its way through the budget process now.
Well,
Cole, if I could ask you, and
Yes.
you're a resident of New London,
yes.
right? What do you think a palatable tax increase should be?
Well, the tax increase that I guess he recommended, was it, what, 20 or 22%?
He started at 20.
Okay, but I guess when they sat down, the council sat down and came up with a formula, they knocked it down to, what, about 8%?
Yes.
Originally, the council was hoping to pass a 2% increase, and they...
2%'s okay, but 8% would be great.
You think 8% would be okay?
No,
8% would be okay, but 20% is just, to me, is ridiculous, because how long are you going to keep it at 20%? Is it going to stay there? Is it ever going to drop back down? If it does, what do you drop it back down to? Why don't you start low and work your way up, not start high, and you're going to have a lot of people who are not going to pay it, and then we're going to have more of the same issues we've had in the last couple of years with people's homes and everything else being taken away or losing it because they can't afford it. In my opinion, he's not even looking at the income of some of the people in this town. There's a lot of people here that do pretty good, but there's some that are not. And at the time when the situation in this economy is not going good, you don't just stick it to people to get your agenda across, and that's what I believe he's doing. And
Well, this is what he
he's
said.
not listening to anyone else.
This is what he said. I don't want to see anybody lose their job. I don't want anyone to lose their business or home due to a tax hike. Pain will be borne by all with this budget, but it must be borne fairly. Every department, employee, business, and taxpayer must contribute. I got news for you. The taxpayer has been sharing and hurting for a long time in this city.
yeah.
This guy, the mayor, and listen, he's a very smart man and a tremendous speaker, an orator, second to none. He doesn't pay taxes in the city. He doesn't own a home, I'm told. I mean,
I think he did. I think he does own a home now.
we'll have to check on that.
I think in the last
But-
year or
but-
so he purchased one.
You know,
Well,
I agree with you 100%, caller. You're right on target, except for the thing with the Republicans.
Well, to answer the question, though, I believe
Okay.
that there is no recall provision in the state of Connecticut. I have to check on
okay,
that.
I understand
but
that.
There isn't.
There is not.
Correct.
So either way, I mean, we've got 3.5 years more of Mayor Finizio.
Well,
So
the problem
my-
that we're going to have, and granted, I tell you, depending on what happens with this next election, come January, February, we're going to be starting the same process again. And you can't let people keep going off of these jobs. You can't lay people off and expect them to be, I don't know, the word for it, I can't really say it, I don't want to say it on air, but what he's doing to people is not right. And when he came in office, you didn't hear any of that before, and now he's doing it. He should have just came out and said it. Now, 3 years from now, when we go to these forums at the Guard Arts or whatever and listen to him, I'm going to be one of the first to grab the mic and tell people, hey, did you forget what this guy did to you 3 years ago?
Well,
Make sure you don't forget about it, because he might do it again to you. And I'm hoping people don't forget. We do have sort of short-sighted on some things when it comes to politicians, because they all say the same thing every 4 years. But it's time for us to start looking at a different approach with people who we put in office. They have to be more transparent, and they have to say, we're going to do this so people know, okay, this guy says he's coming in office, and if he can't fix this budget, he's going to lay off 50 people. He may not get the votes that he needs to stay in office, because people are going to say, well, I don't want to see my friend, or I don't want to lose my job. Why do we need to vote him in? I know that they can come up with another plan, and if he has one, come up with one that makes everyone happy and keep people at work without you laying off all these people, and then you still say you want 20% tax raise. I don't get that.
Well, I
really
believe
don't
that
get it.
the budget that had the 20% increase did not include any layoffs. Is that
You
correct?
did the one that had 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I want to disconnect you. Thank you for the call.
All right, you're
Excellent call.
two things about that. One, there's an assumption that Finizio is going to run for a second term. I'm not convinced that he is.
Let's get him out of the first one. You know, Paul brings up a good point with regard to the layoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but there's an issue going on in the building department now where he's laid off the building department.
Right.
Now, the building department generates about $800,000 a year, I think.
Right. In revenue for...
You have people that have been working there. I said this last week, and I don't mean to be repetitive, but it puzzles me what the process is here. You've got people that have been in there doing a job and doing a fine job for the city. He's laid them off, and he tells them to reapply for the position. Does it make any sense, Bill Sadie, as chairman of the Democratic Party? I mean, do you talk to the mayor and you advise him?
No.
Because It's just bizarre.
To answer your question, again, this is what some people always ask me. I'll get a call. You're mayor, you have to talk to your mayor, you have to talk to your council president. My job is and again, I governed for 10 years and served in an elected capacity for the city. My job is to work with, as a Democratic town chair, is identify candidates, work with candidates, and get candidates elected. From that point, it's their job to govern. I'm not picking up a phone calling John Maynard or Don Macrino or Councilor Passer or whatever saying you need to do this,
don't
this,
you
and
think,
this.
Bill, as in a position, a prestigious position that you hold as chairman of the Democratic Party, the Democrats we're the laughingstock of the state right now. Everybody's talking about us. The locker room at the gym, for crying out loud. People high in society ask you, what the hell is going on in New London? I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on. It's bizarre.
It is bizarre, but also generationally speaking, it's always been bizarre in some form or fashion.
Now, it keeps the day paper and Scope magazine in business, so maybe there is something good about it.
One point I wanted to follow up real quick, though, was does the mayor have an advisory council? Who are his advisors?
No, he actually has his administration. Again, I would think of him, and it's similar like the president has a cabinet.
Yeah.
The governor has commissioners, so I think he has his appointed.
chief of staff.
I'll answer that question from my perspective, but let's get this guy first, or this caller first. Thanks for calling you live.
Thank you, Murray. I have a brief question for Mr. Sadi. I'm listening very, very carefully to the way that you are all stating your opinions. What I'm hearing is references to what he wanted, what he recommended. I believe the mayor gave us that first price tag to fund the existing contractual agreements and the catch-up maintenance that would be required to run the infrastructure of our city for the coming year. I also believe that the simple issue is the residents of any municipality are going to get what they are willing to pay for. Is that essentially the crux of this issue? Is it what the mayor wanted, or is it what it would cost to give us everything that we thought we were going to do and need? And are we willing to pay for what we want? And I'm going to hang up because I so want clarity on this, and I believe, Mr. Sadi, you can give it to me. Thank you.
I thank you
Thanks
very
for the
much,
call.
because I did talk about that in my opening remarks, is the 20% increase is to keep the budget as we know it today, status quo with all the bond projects, not laying off anyone, keeping it in place. That's what would cause, and again, I haven't looked at it exactly, but that was a statement from the mayor's office when he first presented the budget. It's not palatable for any citizen in the city of New London, including myself. I know it wasn't palatable, but it was a straightforward budget. It wasn't playing the voodoo economics of borrowing from this and doing that to balance the budget. The 8.3%, I still think the taxpayers are going to have the final say, as it has been the last probably decade or so in the city of New London through referendum. So I think they will have the final say. So to answer your question, I think the budget that was presented originally, again, I wouldn't agree with it as from a political standpoint, but I think it was presented. It was an honest budget, telling everything that would have to be to keep it status quo and keep the city moving at present day where it is today.
Yeah, but his figures have never added up. He's basing that 20% increase on figures that change on a regular basis, and according to people who have studied the budget, including Mike Passero and Adam Spicacci, who are students of that financial report, the figures don't jive.
Well, this goes back to one of the earlier points of conversation, which is the frustration of the shifting base of definition. We don't have firm numbers to understand what we're playing with or what we have to deal with. As far as the 20% increase in taxes, that budget in some ways, from my perspective, it pulled back the curtain. I agree with the caller. I think what it did was it showed exactly how much the City of New London has been overspending. And how much we're fit to overspend more, and what it would take to actually fund the city properly. It would take 20% increase on everybody, and nobody wants that. So in some ways, the mayor did us a favor by bringing that out. It got everyone's attention.
He exposed it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at it, Murray, and you could sit here and think the last 2 to 3, 4 years. tax abatements.
Yeah, the tax
$50,000 for this. Let's build this, and I'm still to this day frustrated and bewildered by it. You know, closing off right around Columbus Statue so we can build 6 extra parking spots for someone downtown. You know, for a facility that was going to have outside cafes, everything. We know that's not happening. But again, 50,000 was given to that. Tax abatements, on and on.
And where's Pfizer?
Right. And
Where's
here
Pfizer
we are
now?
Pfizer EB. But,
Yeah.
Well, thank God we have EB.
Right.
But again, are we dancing down the same road? Where, I mean, what kind of sweetheart deal are they getting, and how much are we not going to get in tax revenue?
That
from
will come out, Ian, but the question in my mind is not about EB or Pfizer's. The question is about economic development. We haven't heard the words economic development from this mayor. Not one word about it. Where is the economic development? Because if we want to increase our tax base, we need economic development. Millions of dollars were invested in the city, and which we all, no matter where you live in Connecticut, you contributed to. There is nothing happening down the last $84 million plus of economic development.
Well, the unfortunate thing, Murray, is we know from, and I'll mention the 2 words that are swearing in the London eminent domain. It happened. The peninsula, Fort Trumbull Peninsula, has now been tied up for almost over a decade. Now they have a project that was approved by this previous council to move forward with again, when I was talking about tax abatements, getting several $1 million parcel for free, and also getting a tax abatement on top of it. That should be the prime spot for economic development, but that's got to be run through DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, because it's still the state funds that made the site that way. So it's a double-edged sword. But before, and if you don't mind, I know it's your show, but I want to segue into a couple things that I want to talk about, and if you don't mind, is especially the ruling as of yesterday with the special master with the New London Board of Ed, New London.
Well, I'm told, speaking of that special master, I'm told that special master is going to get paid $250,000. Is that possible?
I have no idea. It's paid from the state.
The last people I want making decisions on my behalf are people on the state level, because they haven't done so good in the last 50 years. None of them. Collectively, they get an F, but I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just didn't want to leave tonight's table and not being able to...
Well, what do you think about it?
I totally am in agreement with it.
With the intervention?
With the intervention, and I hope it's more than an intervention. And I'm not faulting this board or any boards or anything, but we've had a system that has failed our children. There's a select few, including my older son, that has done well, transferred here. But again, the parental involvement, we can hear all the rhetoric and everything. And I'm going back to 87 through 89 when I served on the Board of Ed. Oh, we're a poor city. We have, they gave, and again, I'll say it was 7-0 Democratic board then. So I'll say Democrats too, in the liberal way, we're saying, oh, they can't learn, and we have this, and we always put excuses before obviously educating the kid. The best example I will use, there was actually, and I applaud, there was 3 local kids drafted in by the Major League Baseball. One kid went to St. Bernard's and got drafted. Another one just about to graduate from Waterford High was drafted, and another gentleman, and I'm forgetting his name, where he was from, but 3 that were drafted. And there was one kid that played on their state championship team, fantastic pitcher. Moved up halfway through his life from Puerto Rico, and definitely would have been playing over 80-point pitching. I talked to the coach there, and again, I coached him in Legion and also in Babe Ruth, and I asked about it. He goes, Bill, I'd love to have him on my team, but he had 6 Fs in his high school years. 6 Fs at New London High School. That's a travesty.
So, do you think that, throwing more money at this problem has not worked? We've done that throughout the years. Is the problem, number one, definable? And is the problem, do you think, academic, or is it a cultural problem? Somebody somewhere must have an answer and a solution to this problem.
My personal belief, I don't want to jump in because you're the actual scheduled guest here, but so if you want to go first.
No, please.
I feel strongly that the whole of the educational system in this country is flawed. What we see in New London is just it's a microcosm, and it's intensified. What we see is the worst end of it. But I think the education system, with No Child Left Behind and all these kind of like standardized testing modes of education, it it was designed for industrial, industrial age type stuff to prep kids to go out into factories and whatnot. It's not healthy for development of minds in kids. I think the whole of the educational system needs to be reconsidered.
But yet you have have kids this year. So you have some wonderful kids in New London High.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's going to West Point. Kevin Kavanaugh's son's going to Coast Guard Academy, and there are several more. I mean, I don't think you can just put your finger on it
But Murray,
or paint it with a broad brush.
20 years ago, 1970, it was more than 20 years ago, had 4 kids from New London High going to Annapolis, 3 going to the Coast Guard Academy. The unfortunate thing is, in the mid-'80s, there was a lawsuit filed, Chef versus O'Neill, based on the very reason that the inner-city children, and I totally agree with this, don't have the same fair shake as the external communities such as Waterford, East Lyme, and
So
our
what's the
area.
solution?
So the settlement came down that there was a school choice or voucher system that the kids would go there. Then all the state, when they didn't have money, said, oh, well, we can't afford to ship them there. Oh, you mean transport them there? Oh, we can't do it. It's only Hartford, it's only Waterbury. And what frustrates me the most, I remember talking to then the Education Commission, I go, you know, so what you're telling me is if you had a $50 million settlement like the tobaccos that are billions, you don't have the money so you don't pay it back. It doesn't work that way. But for some reason we left the state of Connecticut, and I fault the state because they have oversight of the education system, you know, because the kids in New London. And you look at what are the districts that are haven't been taken over? Wyndham, New London, Bridgeport, West Haven, Waterbury, Hartford. They're all the inner cities.
You guys, we only got 10 minutes left. We got a call. Would you mind if we... Did you want to say anything else on it?
Fine.
Thanks for calling you live.
Yes, just a brief comment. I noticed... Oh. Hello.
Hello?
You're live.
Oh, I'm sorry. I noticed on the news tonight that Ansonia High School, the schools in Ansonia, I guess they weren't doing so good with their grades. Now that their grade levels are up, they cut off all the funding. So now they're going to be cutting out all their sports and stuff like that. So, you know, what kind of reward is that, where the students actually bring their grades up and now, boom, all their sports and extracurricular
Is
activities
that
are
being
being cut out?
driven by the local
Thank
school
you.
board?
Yeah, it would be. The final say would be that, you know, and what happens there, it's the scare tactics Board of Ed.
I honestly don't know all the details.
Must be budget time.
It's budget time. I
And
mean,
they're going to
Hang
cut the
on.
football
Hang on.
team, the cheerleaders, the gifted
Right.
program, the music program, because that's what these politicians do.
So it's the Board of Ed trying to get people upset with the city council, whoever governs that.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling you live. Quickly, please. Hello.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, I have a question for Bill Sadai.
Sure.
Bill, why is the vice chairman of a DTC attacking the sitting city councilors? Don't you think that's kind of inappropriate?
Totally.
What's the question?
And the vice chair of our New London Democratic Town Committee.
Who is that?
Attacking members of our Democratic City Council or Board of Ed or whatever.
Who's
To
the
answer
vice
your
chair?
we have 3 vice chairs. To answer your question, I totally agree, and it will be addressed at our next town.
Who are
committee
you
meeting.
talking about, ma'am? Who's she talking
Can we
about?
get a little clarity
We
on
got
that?
it? Can we have inside information here?
I know why it's been brought to my attention.
So could you
tuned for the
expound
next-
on it?
Stay tuned for the next New London Democratic Town Committee meeting.
Are you in control of the New London Democrats, Bill?
No, I think the 80-member town committee is in control. I just chair the committee.
I was told at the town committee election meeting that there were certain people that were told, don't bother coming because you're not going to make the cut. Was that from your direction or from someone else's, or is that not true
Are you
information?
talking during the caucus?
No, during the election. Of
Yeah,
the new-
the caucus, so, yeah, the caucus.
Of the new
who
town
would-
committee.
Yeah, I don't know who would have told them that.
Let's get to the council meeting. I got a question for you. You know, cable access has been the greatest thing because you can watch the council meetings, and I'll take my hat off. Although it was discouraged for many years, certainly it's a eye-opener for many people who can't go up there and witness what goes on there. But my question is, there's some concern about the town attorneys, who his loyalty is to. For instance, the other night, a question was asked, and he couldn't give the answer because it was a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, my foot, you're getting paid, we want your opinion on it. Should the city council hire their own attorney so that they get an impartial view of
No.
of decisions.
No.
Because
The first thing is, first of all, cost savings. And I'll say it because I sat there and our town attorney, and we had two when I was there, is, first of all, what do we need to have? I've been to many other municipal
He's
meetings.
getting paid,
You don't
right?
have the attorney sitting there at billable hours. First of all, what do they need to be there? If there's a question that you as a counselor, bring up, the administration can bring back, and by that day or the next day or the next meeting can have the answer. So,
Yeah.
again.
I mean, they're getting paid. They're getting paid
they're sitting
lawyers'
there.
hours.
I don't know.
Lawyers'
I don't know
wages
how
to be
it's
sitting
worked now,
inside.
but ours was of contract. He wasn't a city employee
Okay.
then, so yes, it was billable hours.
Is,
That's a little ludicrous.
What
A
is
little ludicrous.
Kevin Kavanaugh's position? He's got more papers in front of him than the Secretary of State.
Well, Kevin was very versed at especially in this budget process, serving, as mayor and also on the city council for a number of years. So I think he's been a liaison to the council, unpaid, volunteer, but been working with the council through the budgetary process.
Boy, he puts in a lot of hours with that.
Doing a great job with OpSale also.
By the way, speaking of OpSale, I don't know if I can ask you this, and you'll dodge it even if I can't. Should we expect fireworks this year at OpSale and Sailfest?
Do you not read the paper? I'm proud to announce the Mashantucket Pequot Fireworks Extravaganza are going on for the 20th year here in the city of New London. But no, that press release was about 2 months ago, Murray, so I guess we got to get another one out. We'll give the exclusive to Scott.
All right, it's on.
Listen, back to the police department for a minute. What's your feeling on what has transpired with regard to the police department in view of the fact that he was going to lay off was it 10 or 20? I forget what it is.
10.
10. And then the chief beeps in, she's got the dough. Is there any need to lay off those policemen in view of the fact that even the chief of police says she's got the money?
Again, not looking at that budget closely, but what I understand and word on the street or at the coffee shops is, it was money that they looked into the overtime budget. What I'd hate to have happen is find out that it was the overtime budget, then we get two-thirds of the way, through next year's budget, and realize we still have to put police out there, but where the funding, we'll have to come back to council for more money.
Yeah.
One thing that needs to be kept in mind, it costs a lot of money to train these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he lays, it's been a political blackmail issue for me from day one, and I don't believe he's going to do it. I think he's bluffing, although he says he doesn't bluff. If you lay the 10 off thinking you're going to get him back, we're not going to get him back because they're spoken for already. These guys already have jobs. We're going to have to go out and retrain another 10 if they needed. He's cutting his nose off despite his face. We got 2 calls. Thanks for calling you live. Quickly, please.
Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the cities that Mr. Sadai has recently mentioned just a couple minutes ago that are in tough shape, guess what? They're all strong major form of government. Also, Mr. Sadai, you've been around a long time. Why are you blaming people today for the problems with the ADA at the high school? You were on the Board of Ed many, many years ago. Why wasn't it fixed back then? Thanks.
And no, that's a very good question. I'll give
Thanks
a
for the
quick
call.
answer because I know we have someone else's. And as a city councilor part-time, I wasn't paying attention or aware of it until my son started to attend the high school. They took him from Nathan Hale. He didn't go to the middle school, right to the high school, and he was there 2 years before I realized he wasn't able to get to almost 50%. And the final straw was there's a gentleman who aged out. He turned 21 last year. He didn't get to experience about 80% of the high school because of the wheelchair configuration. So I'll take the blame, too. I have no problem with that.
Thank you for calling you live.
Hi, Murray. Great show tonight. I have a question for Mr. Sadi. I'm sure you've gotten complaints about the mayor. Am I right or wrong?
I've a lot of people, yes, people have expressed concerns.
Right.
And compliments also, but concerns also.
Well, word has it that if people were to vote tomorrow, I don't think he'd get elected. Because a lot of them are sorry they voted for him. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, Murray, can I just say one more thing? I know we only got a minute
Yep,
left.
go ahead.
Going back to school real quick.
4 minutes.
When we look at, there's talk of building a new London high school. You go less than a mile and a half away, Waterford's spending about $85 million on a high school. When you were growing up, I know you didn't grow up here, but the rest of your family, everyone from East Lyme, Montville, everyone went to New London High. Got away with the county, got rid of the county form of government. There needs to be regional school districts. again, it's a political football that people up in Hartford won't want to deal with, but it needs to be regional.
But they're the
school
bus
districts.
driver of that issue, and you know and I know that that's never
Right.
never going to happen.
Right. Because
The bus driver?
For that to happen, it would
Mm-hmm.
have to be a state mandate,
Yeah.
and it would have to be an executive order, a real executive order by the governor, and that's not going to happen. And
What was preventing that from happening?
politics.
the other thing too is
We've been talking about.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
One
well-
thing I didn't tell you.
Yeah.
He gave me my start 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the same thing for 15 years, and all we do is go around in circles. We've been talking about regionalization. We've heard the city of New Orleans has great potential. We got a deep water port. We got 95. We got this. We got that.
Yeah.
And I never want to hear potential again. But listen, we're almost out of time, and I'll give Ian the last question.
Well, I don't have a question on the top of my head, but I did want to respond to the last caller, how she's displeased with Finizio's performance thus far and theorizes that he wouldn't get elected if they held the election again today. One of the things, overwhelmingly he was voted in 2-1 or so. What that said to me was that regardless of anything, the popular will of the people in New London wanted something different, wanted a change, wanted to move away from the way things have been done. And I think we're in the very early phases of that transition. And, nobody's, the guy who's cleaning up the place is never going to be the popular guy. It's a thankless job, and I would not be surprised if he chose not to run again. We won't know the outcome of his policy decisions for years to come. He very well may be making the right moves. It is causing us to look at things in a very harsh and critical light, which I think is been long overdue in New London, to take a harsh look at exactly. An agonizing reappraisal is perhaps a better term for it. You got to get it on the table and see what exactly it is, how bad is the rat's nest, and what's it going to take to fix
Gentlemen,
it.
unfortunately, we're out of time. I blame the whole thing on Saturday. And thank you for coming on the show.
Murray.
Ian,
Thank
keep
you,
up the
Murray.
good
Thank
work.
you.
Watch the Scope
Thank you.
magazine because they do tremendous work, and I look forward to the next interview. Some of that garbage you got is a little crazy, but I like your interviews.
We try to keep it spicy.
REI signing off from the city. Too tough to die. New London, thank you for watching the show.